Who is Luke Parker?
I was born August 9th, 2007. Lived in Mississippi in the Purvis area all my life. I grew up on a farm until I was about 7, and on that farm, I mean, I have some great memories growing up there. We had a bunch of cows, we had a bunch of land. We used to ride four-wheelers out there all the time. And growing up, I had a great childhood. I don't really have any bad memories there. Growing up was a lot of fun. Um, it just really felt like I could be a kid and I could be myself there. Grew up in the Purvis public school. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My dad was a painter. Um, Grew up around them my whole life. And then when I turned 7, I think it was the time I graduated second grade, my dad passed in an accident. It was a work related accident. I don't remember exactly the details, but it was some problem with the environment he was painting in combined with like a heart issue. And we couldn't resuscitate him. So he ended up passing that day. I forget exactly what day it was, but it was sometime around the start of summer. Then after that, we decided to sell the farm because we didn't really have much use for it anymore since he was the whole reason we were on the farm. We sold all our cows, we sold our land, and that house that we sold, my mom and dad built together. So
Dang.
definitely felt like we were leaving a piece of us behind, but
Yeah.
it was the start of a new chapter for sure. Then moved to a new place in a bigger neighborhood. It felt a little bit quieter, felt a little more peaceful, but I definitely think we needed that move just to find a new environment and find our new like way of life after such a big change. But we had a bunch of supportive family friends, my mom's teacher friends. Basically, we had our whole school come over with
Dang.
all our teachers from like kindergarten through second grade. But there was a lot of support, and I think that made it really easy to get through. Aside from the passing, life still went on as normal. It
Right.
went pretty smooth. That was really my early childhood, and then the biggest change after that was whenever I decided to stop going to public school and started. We experimented a little with online school. Didn't feel right for me, so we just went fully into homeschooling. And that was around ninth grade. We went fully into homeschooling, so I've been homeschooled for all my high school life. But I definitely preferred that to public school, especially during the whole COVID lockdown era. It felt a lot easier just being able to be at home and focus on school rather than having to go to school and worry about a disease on top of everything else. So definitely made my high school experience a lot better going to homeschool. And then there was from about eighth grade. Eighth grade was the year I started online school because that was right when COVID started and the private school wasn't fully opened back up yet. So experimented with online school through eighth grade, then went fully homeschooled in ninth grade, and then started taking some classes with other homeschoolers in 10th grade. And that 3 year period, I'll get into this a lot more in my testimony, but that 3 year period, I didn't really have anyone to talk to. I had no friends. Me and my brother didn't have a super great relationship at that time, so it was really just me and my mom, and that was all I talked to. And I do think I kept a lot of things to myself in that time, and that kind of helped me grow into who I am today. I still like to be a little more private, keep things to myself, but other than that, when I started 10th grade and started taking classes with other homeschoolers, that's when I started getting into the whole forerunners sports.
Mm.
I started playing tennis at that time, so it's been about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. Um, but that's when I really started talking to people again, started getting more of a social life and getting into a more normal high school experience.
Mm.
And that's really brought me to where I am now.
Obviously, like your dad passing at a young age is that's huge, you know. And I know a lot of people go through that, and it's gotta be so hard to go through. And just take me like back to, I mean, where were you when that happened? Like, when did you get the news that like something had happened like that?
I think I think it was the day second grade ended for me. So I was still we were still at the school, and it felt really strange going from just a normal day at school, what was supposed to be a happy day of just being done with it all, going to a new grade, going to a whole new building for
Mm.
school. We went home. I played baseball a lot when I was a kid, and I think that day was our last game of the season. And my dad was one of the coaches for our team. And then, as I'm getting ready for the game, as we're getting in the car ready to go, we get the call that he's in the hospital. Something happened, and it just felt like a complete turnaround, like a 180 of what I was feeling before. I felt so like normal. I felt happy. I felt energetic,
Mm.
and then immediately after, it was just like it was just crushing. Like
Yeah.
I felt the weight of it all. Nothing, everything felt like out of balance. And I was so young when it happened. I was only 7,
Right.
so I don't remember a lot of the specific details. But we get to the hospital. I think me, my brother, and my grandma go into a different room or something in the hospital, like one of the gyms, to just kind of get away from everything. And we were there for a while. I didn't really talk much at all during it. I kind of just remember keeping to myself a lot in that moment. And then eventually my whole family got back together and me and my brother got the news that it happened. Um, I can't remember my exact reaction to hearing that he died, but I know the feeling. It was completely new, and it's really a feeling that I haven't experienced since then.
Yeah.
But it was just the hardest thing I had gone through up until that time, and it felt like, obviously I was a kid, so I didn't really grasp this yet, but it felt like my first real look into what life looks like.
Mm.
Like life isn't always going to be happy. Life isn't always going to be fun. It's not always going to be a last baseball game of the season. It's not always going to be your last school day of the year. There's stuff that happens that it's an indescribable feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never had to go through something like that, but I can only imagine the thoughts that have to go through your mind. And I mean, being 7 years old, I mean, nothing is fully developed yet. I mean, everything is. I mean, you don't barely understand anything about the world yet, and then to have to go through that is, I mean, and it also just be a complete shocker, like out of nowhere, is absolutely wild. And like the days following, like what is going through your mind if you can remember that? What is going through your mind like the days following, and like what do those battles look like?
Hmm. I mean, I was really young, so I don't know if I got in any of the more serious battles with grief, but something I do remember is everything just felt off.
Mm.
Like nothing felt right.
Mm.
Everything I did felt wrong. Everything I said felt wrong. It just felt like there was a big part of me missing,
Mm.
which there really was. It felt like a part of my life was missing, but now I know it wasn't missing. It was just shaken up. It was thrown off. And at the time, I never understood that your life was meant to change. Your life was meant to go through difficult seasons. And because I was so young, I just thought everything was going to kind of stay the same
Right.
for a long time. But that was my first experience with like real deep hard change.
How is that affecting you today?
The grief is definitely past, thankfully. Um, there are still times I miss him, or times I think, what would be different in this situation if I had a father?
Mm.
And there are times I think about my experiences growing up, thinking how those would have changed, like my school life. Would I be where I am today if he was still in my life? So there's a lot of questions, mostly because I didn't have him. I've had him out of my life for over a decade.
Right.
So I've lived more life and I can remember a lot more without him than with him. So it's mostly just questioning what my life would look like um, if he was still here. That's the only kind of grief I'm still dealing with, is wondering what would have changed. But it's definitely helped me grow into the person that I am today. Definitely a struggle through my earlier years, but as I've gotten older, I've realized that this is just this is God's plan for my life.
Right.
This is how it was supposed to go. And I'm so happy with where I am now that I can't be mad at what happened,
Mm.
because if what happened has brought me to where I am now, then I don't think I'd go back and change anything.
Right. If you had to tell somebody who's in your position, you know, a lot of people grow up without their dads, but their dads might not be passed away. Um, let's just focus on that. You know, say somebody is in your exact position. You know, their dad passed away at a young age, or even recently. What is something that you would tell them?
I'd say, especially for younger guys, it's gonna feel like there's something wrong with you. Like if your dad passes, or if your dad leaves, or if you just don't have one in your life, it's gonna feel like, as a man, there's something wrong with you. Like you don't know a lot of the things that a dad would have taught you growing up. It feels like you don't really know how to become a full grown man without it. Not saying that I've become one yet, but getting there. Um, but my encouragement, especially to guys, would be there's nothing wrong with you. It's a part of life. Grief, you're going to go through grief no matter what, no matter who it is. You're going to experience grief in your life. But that doesn't mean that there's a part of you missing. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. You know, you're going to have to learn the things that are missing that your dad would have taught you, and it's going to be difficult, but it's not going to be impossible. So the encouragement would just be keep going. For anyone who's experiencing any kind of grief in their life, is life isn't going to stop. It's going to feel like it stops, but for everyone else, it's going to keep going. Right? Whenever my dad died, there were people who had kids that day. There were people who got married. There were people who were going to remember that day as the happiest day of their life.
Right.
And I think that kind of puts it into perspective for me that there's good days, there's bad days. Sometimes they're both. And just going through life with that mindset that no matter what comes, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep pushing through. That's what has helped me the most dealing with grief.
What is probably the biggest propelling force in your life? Like, what drives you to want to be better and to continue to improve and to change? Is it, you know, your dad dying at a young age, or is there something more to that, or is it something just completely different?
I think there's a lot of different forces that have like added up over time, but the main force for me, and I can't remember exactly what verse it is, but it's in one of Paul's letters where he says, "Strive for perfection." That's my biggest driving force. Is and I've grown a lot with that kind of mindset over time to now it's not just perfection, it's striving to be more like Christ every day,
Mm.
which is basically just another way of saying strive for
Mm-hmm.
perfection. But for me right now, as I've grown with this kind of mindset over a long period of time, it's grown from being the best at everything I do to not necessarily being the best, but being so comfortable with who I am. But that comfort doesn't come from my personality, it doesn't come from me being okay with everything that happens in my life. It's come from me learning what love is in my life. And I'll get into that a lot more with my testimony too. But my driving force really just comes from how can I love more like Christ? How can I love the people around me? How can I love them with my actions? How can I serve them? Right? And that's love has mostly been the driving force in my life. And love is perfect. So how do I strive to live more in love?
Who would you say is like the biggest, like influential person in your life? Like, who has always been there for you, especially in those rough moments? Like, who is that rock in your life that you could go to when you have struggles like that?
It's definitely my mom. She's always been there for as long as I can remember. And there have been plenty of hard conversations she's had with me and my brother, and sometimes both of us. And there's been a lot of setting us straight and getting us back in line. And there's been a lot of like gentle teaching. Because sometimes, especially in those times where we were so broken down with our circumstances and the things around us, it felt like she was always there to bring us back up. And she's definitely been the biggest example of how to live in love and how to strive for perfection with how you show others love, with how you serve them, with how you act, with how you conduct yourself. She's been my biggest influence in that driving force in my life. She's been my biggest influence teaching me who I am today. And I know that no matter what happens, I can always go to her.
That's amazing because, you know, I can imagine like as a mother, when there is no more father figure in the house, like you have to, in a way, fill that role, but also still balance like being a mother and not ever truly being able to fill that role completely. Um, and I know that's got to be hard. Like, where were you at with God around when your dad passed? Was that a common conversation in your house at the time? Were you going to church a lot or consistently at that time? Um, what was your relationship like with Christ at that point in your life?
Yeah, I was young, so I don't think there was much maturity there. There wasn't a whole lot of growth there, but I mean, I've grown up in church my whole life. I've gone to the same church my whole life, which I'm very grateful for because we found a really good one. But my my mom and my dad were a huge example of Christ followers and living like Christ for me my whole life. That's definitely my earliest memories, seeing and remembering their conversations with us, with each other about their faith and seeing how they modeled prioritizing it. So, my personal relationship with God, it was that of a child, which is understandable, but I think after my dad passed, I was so young, I didn't really know what to think about it. So there was definitely thoughts in my head of why would God let this happen?
Right.
Like, what is this supposed to bring to my life? And those thoughts never really went away until I got a lot closer with Christ. But at the time of his passing, it was it was really just questioning God, like doubting if he was there, doubting why he would let this happen, and just my circumstances overall made me question my faith a lot. And over time, that's definitely grown, and I've searched for the answers to those questions in a lot of places. But I think God has definitely revealed the answer to me now as to why He would let that happen because I've seen over the course of my life how it's shaped me, how it's made me grow. But now I'm a lot more confident that no matter the circumstances, I can trust God knows what He's doing.
Mm. My biggest thing, because I've had a rocky road, and you know this probably a lot better than most people watching. I mean, I've had a rocky road with following Christ and just believing in general. I went through a season where, I called myself an atheist, and I was very much an atheist at that point in time. Um, and I'm back now. Um, but even still, there's those challenges, and I'm still battling every single day, and I'm not where I want to be with my relationship with God now. Um, but let's just go into your testimony. Like, what is your journey looking like?
Mhm.
Because I know I had a rough one. Um, I'm just curious to see because I've never even heard this. What your journey is?
Hmm. Definitely a long story.
Yeah.
So, grew up in church my whole life. Got dedicated when I was a baby, baptized when I was a kid. Um, Always grew up in church. Always grew up with my parents around modeling faith for me, modeling religion for me. But my personal journey definitely started around the time of my dad's death, and that's when I really started questioning God, doubting if He was there, doubting why He lets bad things like that happen, if He's supposedly always good. And then my faith really got tested when I started eighth grade. That's when I started online school. That's when I lost contact with all of my friends from public school. That's when I really had no one to talk to. And it was a good 3 year period from eighth grade to 10th grade where I had no friends. And as I've grown more socially, it's like I've had to relearn how to talk to people.
Yeah.
There's definitely been some struggles there, but there's a good 3 year period of isolation. And this was during COVID, so we couldn't go anywhere because everywhere was shut down. Our church wasn't back in person for a while. It was all online. And I kind of used that as an excuse to just isolate myself and keep to myself. And in that time, I've always been a really big perfectionist, but in that time, it was very bad. Like I would struggle a lot. Every single mistake I made, every time I would embarrass myself, everything added up, and just I never took it as it was. I never took it on the chin and just like moved on. It always had to affect my self-worth. So, being that perfectionist, and at the time I was in a really bad mindset of self-hatred. Every mistake I would make, every opportunity I got to remind myself of how I can't do anything right, how wrong everything was in my life. Every opportunity I got was a chance to remind myself how much I really hated myself. But over time, that's definitely changed into being more of a challenge for me to overcome my perfectionism. It's allowed me to realize I can't be perfect. And instead of beating myself up for my mistakes, it's allowed me to learn how to grow from them. But the biggest part of my testimony is for that 3 years, I felt so unworthy of love. Like, anytime I would see love given to me, anytime I would see it just in my life in general, instead of taking it, instead of feeling happy about it, I would question it. Like, why? What did I do to deserve this? Why should I have this? And because of that, I felt like I shouldn't have it. So at that time, I was scared of love. I pushed it away. I ran from it. And that led me to kind of falling out of my faith a good bit. Stopped reading my Bible, stopped paying attention in church, stopped really listening to people when they talked about their faith. And it led me down a worldly lifestyle, giving into pride and anger a lot, and taking that out on myself a lot. I definitely had some anger problems through those 3 years, but through that 3 years, it was a very hard process of learning that love is not something to be earned, because that was the mindset I was in. I thought if I couldn't earn it, then I shouldn't have it. And obviously, there's nothing you can ever do to earn love. So that was a really hard thing for me to learn. But over those 3 years, and as I've gotten out of that period now, it's definitely, my mindset has definitely grown into love being something that's given and accepted like a gift rather than a prize that has to be earned. And that, along with joining a worship team, finding good Christ-like friends who help me grow closer to God, that has changed my whole perception of love, and it's allowed me to learn how to accept it instead of beating myself up for it whenever I would receive it because I felt like I didn't deserve it. And that has really brought me to where I am now, and it was like a gradual softening of my heart to back to God, and meeting those people in my life and being in those circumstances where I was a lot closer to religion, where I was a lot closer to faith. It brought me so much closer to God, and it's led me to where I am now. And that it was about a year, I'd say, after 10th grade started, a good year. It took me to really learn how to accept love. And now I'd say where I am is I'm in a place where God has led me to believing that love is okay to have in my life, because I felt so wrong whenever I had it. I can't really describe it, but my best way of describing it is I felt like a fraud. Like, anytime I saw love in my life, I felt like a fraud. I felt like I didn't deserve any of this. And because I didn't deserve it, I wanted to run away from it. But over that year long period of God softening my heart, it just led me back to Him. And now that I'm in such a great place with Christ and able to live in love and not only receive it, but give it to other people, it's just shown me how wrong my mindset was. And there's definitely been a lot of growth out of that. But that's the biggest part of my testimony, is how God has taken me from feeling like a fraud whenever I would see love to now feeling like it's something I can have in my life, and it's something that He's freely given me.
Hmm.
I can go like more into how I face that kind of mindset now.
Okay.
So that whole mindset of feeling unworthy of love and feeling like all I deserved in my life was my own hate for myself. That was my biggest struggle over that 3 year period. But now that mindset still definitely creeps in sometimes. And I feel like I have to talk myself off a cliff like I did 3 years ago, sometimes now, but it's grown a lot more to realizing how much of a lie that is, and realizing that it's just the enemy trying to tell me that I don't want love. Because if I'm being led away from love, I'm being led away from God. And that's what allows me to get caught in sin. That's what allows me to get caught in old habits. It's what allows me to really forget about my relationship with Christ. But now, as I've learned more how to cope with that mindset and how to deal with it, the the approach to it has been, instead of forgetting about my relationship with Christ, leaning into it and prioritizing it more. And whenever I feel unworthy of love, surrounding myself with God's love, most of the time just by going into His Word. But surrounding myself with His love, it reminds me that even though I don't deserve it, I remember how much I truly want it in my life. And that kind of mindset is so much more powerless than it was 3 years ago because of that. That I've Now that I have more people in my life who show me love in the best ways too, it's shown me how much I really do want love, despite how much my brain is going to tell me I don't, despite how much that mindset is going to try to trick me into falling away from love. But every time I approach that kind of mindset now, instead of running away from love, I try to surround myself with it as much as possible to remind myself that even though I'm unworthy of it, it's not about being worthy. It's about having the right people in your life, and it's about being as close to Christ as possible.
Yeah, man, I relate to so much of that testimony, especially with like being super hard on myself. Um, I've always been hard on myself in everything that I've did or done, and it's propelled me to success in a lot of things that I do because I strive to want to be the best, not just for the people around me, but for myself. Like I genuinely just want to prove to myself and make myself feel satisfied at the end of the day because I know that I put in everything that I can to achieve this stuff because I am such a perfectionist. And and I think that's good in the work environment and in sports. But when it comes to a relationship, especially your relationship with Christ, it's not because you're going to make mistakes. And going from a full-on atheist and then making my way back to Christ, there was a point where I was really locked in and I was doing really good. And I think that's just because of the overwhelming like sense of, oh wait, he is real. And just I don't even know how to describe it. There was definitely a point in my life right after going from atheist to back to Christianity. This was the real Christianity that I'm experiencing now because before it was like, mainly living off of what my parents had taught me, but not having it in my heart and really believing in it. And there was a point where I was doing really good, but time continued to go on, and then I start falling back into some of the old habits that I was doing before, and I was just so hard on myself, to the point to where I didn't want to pray at the end of the night, because I was so embarrassed or so mad that I kept falling back into these things. And it got to a point to where I was just kind of like, well, screw it, you know? And I was just loud, loud car. I was just like, screw it. And I started to purposefully go back into some of like the not so bad habits that I was doing back in the day. Just to try and break that cycle of just being so hard on myself, allowing myself, being more lenient with myself to go out there and do whatever I wanted to do, kind of deal. Um, and I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. I'm not saying go do a little bit of bad and then just, for the overall good, do a little bit of bad here. I'm not saying go do that, but I think it worked a little bit for me. But then it also got me into trouble because I kept going. It's so hard to just limit yourself to a little bit of this when a little bit more seems so much better. And it got me into trouble, and I fell back into a lot of the old habits, like really bad. And I mean, that was this year, and I'm still kind of dealing with it. You know, I'm still not back to where I was. Even just reading the Bible consistently, and even just feeling it, you know. And I feel really bad a lot of the times now because I just feel like the relationship got so bad out of nowhere because it was so strong. And it's like now I don't feel it. And I know you don't base it off of how you feel. And God is always there. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to forsake you. But I don't feel it at all, like almost ever anymore. And even just the conviction isn't there like it used to be. And it's just been hard to get back on track with everything and to get back onto where I was and where I know I can be with it. And I don't know, I just venting a little bit. Um, it's just hard, you know what I'm saying? It's just hard to maintain that relationship when everything around you looks so good. And it's just hard, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they say everything in moderation, but I think there's a bit of a lie to that because moderation moderation is good, but moderation can be like a gateway drug and can lead to so much more of that thing that you were trying to keep at bay. And giving into that, it's gonna make you feel ashamed. Like whenever I would give into an old habit or whenever I'd fall back into pride or anger, I'd get angry at myself and I'd want to run away from God because I'd feel ashamed of what I'd done. But I think the thing that helped me the most with that kind of mindset is remembering that God already knew I was going to do that. Like it's not a surprise to him, it's not a shock. He knows, he's ready, and he still loves me no matter what. So, in those times where I feel like I want to run away from God the most, those are the times where I have to force myself to lean in as close as possible. Because there have been so many days where I haven't felt it. I haven't felt the closeness. There have been times where I haven't felt like worshiping. I haven't felt like praying. I haven't felt like reading my Bible because I felt like a fraud again
Yeah,
for
imposter syndrome.
I felt like a fraud for what I'd done and the fact that I still call myself a Christian after these sins that I kept falling into. But they say faith is not about a feeling, and that couldn't be more true. Every time I feel that way, every time I feel wrong in my faith, every time I feel like I've let God down, I feel like the best thing I've done is just repeating the truths and the promises of God in my head that he already he's already shown how much he loves us. He has already sacrificed his son. That can't be taken away from us. That can't be changed based off 1 or 10 or even 100 actions we do. Nothing is going to change his love for us because the action has already been taken. Right? And after his son's death and resurrection, after Jesus came as man and showed us what true love really looks like and the true love that God has for us. It's like the deal was set. There's nothing that's going to affect God's love for us. Right? He has it. It's always there. The only thing that changes is how much we decide to lean into it. The only thing that changes is how much we decide to really accept it. So, whenever I'm dealing with that feeling of not feeling like a Christian or not feeling worthy of God, I just know that running away is only going to make it worse. So I have to force myself to lean in as much as possible, read His Word more, worship Him more, pray more, and that's been what's helped me the most, forgetting about my feelings.
Mm. Yeah, because he's always consistent. Like he's always the same. Um, and like you said, it's really up to you to lean in. And it's all about the effort that you want to put in to get out of this relationship because he's always going to be there for you. And that's a big thing that has helped me a lot this year because I've done a lot of, you know, research because it took a lot of research to go from atheist to Christian because there's so many questions that I didn't have answers to. And a lot of my reading in my spare time has been Christian books. Case for Christ was a big one that really helped solidify like the ins and outs, I guess, of Christianity or the proof for Christianity. Um, and I've gotten into a lot of other ones about mindset, which have helped me a lot. Um, but yeah, it's just a struggle, and having people in your life to surround yourself with help a lot. You know, we text pretty much weekly, um, just asking like for prayers for one another and stuff like that. But having a group of people around you to hold you accountable is huge. And even the YouTube channel for me, I know videos have hardly come out in the past 2 months. None have come out really in the past 2 months. But even just having the YouTube channel to just speak out about stuff like that has helped me a lot. Um, and now I want to flip it back on you. You're a huge part in a worship team for the local church around here. Um, how much has that helped you, like in your walk, being a huge part, as the drummer for a worship team?
I'd say it's definitely having that platform, like you have your YouTube channel, has held me accountable. Because if I fall back into a sin and then have to go play on a Sunday morning, I feel it's big imposter syndrome, right? I feel like there's absolutely no reason that I should be there over someone else. But having that platform and having that responsibility to commit to, it's definitely held me accountable for my actions and how I conduct myself around other people, how I conduct myself on stage and off a stage. But joining the worship team has been a big part of my testimony because being in that environment and surrounding myself with people who are volunteering their time to serve Christ and engage in worship and lead in worship, seeing the sacrifices that they make, and seeing how they're so willing to go in and worship every morning and how passionate they are about leading it, it's really what softened my heart and led me back to realizing that it's love is about an action. Love is about serving others. And through that service, they're showing their love for God. They're showing their love for that church and the people in that church by using their gifts and leading them in worship. Because if they weren't there, who else is going to do it? So it's shown me what love can really look like. And being in an environment in general where God is always present helped lead me back to Him in more ways than I can count. But being on that worship team, and it was really just making the decision to join. Like the first Sunday I auditioned, first Sunday I played. Making that decision was just the hardest part of it. And then committing to it and continuing to do it has been a breeze for me because after that first Sunday I realized how passionate I really am for it,
Mm.
how much it really makes my life feel complete. And having that opportunity to worship, especially for a church where so many other people are passionate about worship, it's opened up opportunities outside of just Sunday mornings to play. And now, me, my brother, and some other friends from our church, and some from a couple other churches in Hattiesburg and Laurel, we host worship nights. The first Monday of every month, we'll go to a venue and we'll host a worship night. And I've seen 50 people there. I've seen close to 100 people there. We've seen people giving their life to Christ in those nights, and the amount of effort we put into it and the passion we have for it, it's shown me what real worship looks like. And that opportunity in that environment has shown me the love of God in ways I've never imagined. Because there are people there from all different walks of life, all different ages. They've gone through so many different experiences. They have so many different testimonies. And seeing them all there, it's an incredibly overwhelming feeling, right? Being able to lead them in worship and being the one who got to be a part of that ministry, it's humbling. It's incredibly humbling. And there are people there who were addicted to drugs. There were people there who were in and out of prison. There were people there who are just like me and grew up in the church for a long time, but fell out of their relationship with God. And now we're all together in that room like one family. It's no one ever feels out of place. Everything feels just as it should be in those rooms on those nights, and all that came from one decision to play on a Sunday morning. So, leaning into that and leaning into being on a worship team has changed my life and especially my faith in so many different ways.
And talking about drug dealers and all that, there's a really bad side to the Christian community of like just wanting to shun those type of people. Um, but I can tell you, if it wasn't for a former drug dealer, I don't think I'd be where I'm at in my faith today. Because if it wasn't for him, you know, not only being at the church when I randomly one Wednesday decided to go to youth, and then him just sparking up a conversation with me, and then also him dedicating his time to meet with me every single week to finally give me the answers to these questions, I would not be here, probably talking to you, having this style of podcast talking about Christ like that. Um, and it really, really disgusts me when I see Christian people just throwing a huge cold shoulder to people with hard past backgrounds because they don't know their story, they don't know how they got there. um I just hate that about the Christian community, how judgmental they are.
I've definitely seen that firsthand. And with a bunch of different churches, with a bunch of different communities, there's always going to be people who are so comfortable with where everything is now that they don't want change. It's definitely coming from a point of being afraid of change, but I can testify to the power that change really has in ministry because one of my friends who I've met at the college group for our church, he used to be addicted to drugs. He used to be in jail. He would be in and out of the system, everything. And now I've seen him, I met him at our worship nights, and he's a youth pastor for a church in Laurel, I want to say. And I've seen him preach and speak at our worship nights, and the power that he has in his prayers and in his words and in the message he conveys. I just can't imagine not having it as a part of our worship nights or as a part of that church that he leads. It's it's really doing a disservice to those kind of people who can bring so much to the table. It's doing a disservice to judge them right off the bat and turn them away because of their past or because of what they're doing right now, because we never know how much God can change them and really show the power that they find in their true calling rather than where they're wandering at the moment or where they wandered in their past. And there's a verse in Second Corinthians. It's 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone and the new has come." And the part of that verse that stands out to me the most is the exclamation mark right after the new has come. I think that's the author telling us that someone becoming a new creation is something to celebrate. It's something to be excited about. It's something to be happy with someone else for. Right? It's not something to judge people or dismiss people right off the bat just because of their past. If they're in Christ, then God Himself isn't even looking at their past. So, what authority do we have to look at their past and then turn them away? There's so many people I've met who have had these dark pasts, who have struggled with addiction, who have struggled with so many other difficult challenges, but seeing how they've overcome it and seeing how they affect other people and how passionate they're in their calling or their ministry, it's been incredible to me to see, and I can't imagine living my life without having those people and the influence they've had on me too.
What does music mean to you? Like, is there a deeper connection to music? Is there a connection to the drums? Like, what is music to you? Is there a special connection that you have to it?
Yeah, music has always been a huge part of my life. Like I think my first drum kit was a little first act drum kit when I was like 3. I had that and I would just go upstairs and beat on it and drive my parents crazy.
Yeah.
And I still do that now at 17,
Yeah.
but Music has always been a big part of my life. My brother plays guitar, I play drums. We've taken lessons, we've done shows together, we play together almost every Sunday morning. And music, it evolved from a hobby into a passion, and it evolved from just something I enjoyed to now being its own ministry for me. Um, at this, I've always enjoyed music. I've always took all my free time to listen to it, and I've always been interested in like seeing artists' backgrounds, seeing their history, seeing how they've changed. But it definitely evolved as I started joining a worship team. It showed me that music isn't just a hobby. It doesn't just have to be something I enjoy. It can be something that leads people to Christ. And seeing that has changed my whole perspective for music, and my whole perspective for ministry as a whole is now something that I thought was just a hobby and something that I thought would stay on the side for most of my life has now changed into being the biggest thing I'm passionate about and being one of the biggest parts of my life. And it showed me not to underestimate any different kind of ministry. It's not always helping homeless people and going out and evangelizing and spreading the gospel, but that doesn't mean God can't work through it just as much, if not more, than those other ministries. Because without me and a bunch of other people who were interested in music as kids, these worship nights wouldn't be a thing. The worship team at our church wouldn't be a thing, right? And worship anywhere wouldn't be a thing. And think about how many people that one night of worship has saved. So, music has just evolved so much for me into being a hobby now to something that God can use to save lives. And having that perspective change has meant so much to me as a musician that it's what I want. I know it's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it showed me that I really can have a future where I'm impacting people like Christ did.
Like, what is the ultimate vision
Hmm.
for your life in ministry or just in music?
Hmm. The dream is just to, for my future, the biggest goal is to live more like Christ every day and impact people like Christ would have. And the dream for me would definitely be to go on tour with some big Christian band or record a live album with them, like Elevation or Corey Asbury or Joel Barnes or someone like that. Because as much as it is a ministry, it's also still a hobby.
Mm.
I still enjoy it. I still love it. I still find so much fulfillment from it. And being able to have my hobby, my passion, and my career all mixed into one would be incredible. So my dream for the future is definitely to tour with someone or to see the world and see how many people worship can really impact and affect. And I was also really considering production because if I can't play drums, I could always do front of house. I could always do lighting. I could always do sound, and that's just as important as anyone up on stage because without them, it wouldn't be happening. And I know for college, I want to go into a sound and recording degree. Um, there's a college up in Nashville called the Belonging Company. They have a whole worship college, and they have their own church. They have their own worship team. They've got everything. And one of my friends is going to go up there and finish some kind of worship related degree, but they've got everything, especially for production. So I could always go up there to finish a degree, maybe take 2 years here, 2 years there, something like that. But it's really just where God takes me. I know that I want to get a degree in sound and recording so I could do production, I could do sound engineering, I could help on albums, I could help on tours, anything like that. So I know career wise where I want to go, but the dream is just how far God is going to take me with it. Whether it's going to be in a church on Sunday or a worldwide tour, I think it's important to have that mindset that no matter where you are, don't place limits on what God can do with you. Because you could be in a room with 50 people or 50,000 people, and God could do 10 times more in that room of 50 people if that's where you're meant to be.
Do you ever think you will like step outside of music, or do you think you will basically stay in music?
It definitely depends on where God takes me. Music has been such a big part of my life that I almost can't envision myself doing anything else. but I know I also have a passion for leading Bible studies, with teaching people, with um, being able to share my faith with people. So I could definitely see futures in evangelizing. I could see futures in being maybe an assistant pastor somewhere. But my passion has been, and I think will always be, worship. But my career could just as easily become teaching or preaching or anything that shares the word of God with people, and I could be just as fulfilled because it's still impacting people in a Christ-like way.
Mm. Yeah. And with any career, there's different there's subsets. You have the big overarching like goal, for you it's a musician, and for me it's, you know, filmmaking, probably. Uh but I also really like public speaking. Um I'm not the best at it. Like even now, like I don't think I'm doing the best, but I definitely enjoy public speaking. And I know it's not for everybody. Um and it's just hard, you know, because there's so many different things that you have to improve on and get better at. Have you ever made like a mistake like playing like on stage? Because I've always thought about that. Um, like what is it? What happens like when you make a mistake? Does it throw you off, or like I don't even know if I'd notice it like in the crowd.
Sometimes there are big mistakes that can throw the band off. Sometimes people are out of key and people can notice it. But at the end of the day, especially in worship, I have to remember that the music itself is not what it's about. Like, we can make mistakes, we can miss a lyric, we can play a wrong note, and none of it really matters because the purpose behind what we're doing isn't the music itself. So, especially being a perfectionist for me, I have to constantly remind myself that mistakes are okay because it's not the purpose of this ministry. Right? We're all going to make mistakes, especially playing so many notes, singing so many words. You're bound to mess up once or twice.
Mm,
And being able to roll with those mistakes and learning how to keep going and bring the band back, bring the people you're leading back. That's what's more important than any mistake.
yeah, I needed to learn that because like even just now filming the podcast, like, I catch every stutter. I catch like every time I miss say something, or I'm just trying to like think of a question or just continue to keep the conversation flowing. Like, I notice everything, and I know on stage you playing music, you have to notice everything. Um, but I think anybody else looking in, they're really not going to notice anything crazy like that, unless it's like huge. And at the end of the day, like nobody really cares, you know.
Yeah, I think the kind of analogy I use with that is, if we're a crowd and a speaker or a preacher is up on stage, we are going to remember the point of that message or the point of that speech. We're going to remember the really good words they say because that's what we're there for. But the people on stage, if it's a preacher, he's not going to remember the really good stuff he says because he's been planning that out for so long. Instead, what he's going to remember is the one time he drops his Bible on stage,
Right.
the one time he trips on his way up to the front of the stage. So, for us that are in that position of leading it and being that public speaker, being that musician, we're going to remember our mistakes because it's so glaring and obvious to
Right.
us because we know what we really want to do and what we really want to be there for, like what we want to say, what we want to play. But for everyone else in the crowd that we're leading, they're not going to notice the mistakes because they're not there for the mistakes. They're there to hear the music. They're there to experience the worship. They're there
As
to,
it is, like as a whole, you
yeah, they're
know.
there to experience the message, and
Mm,
that's what they're going to remember out of all of it.
right. Um, yeah, dude. How's 24? How's 2024 been for you?
2024 has been a really interesting year. Probably my most um, socially active year, especially after being in isolation for so long. But I've gained a lot of knowledge with Christ, and I've grown the most in my walk with Christ this year out of any other year. And there have been so many good things to come out of this year. Um, about this time a year ago, I joined the worship team,
Really?
and now it's opened up so many different opportunities for me. And it's really changed who I am as a person and how I experience worship and how I walk with Christ. And I've gotten so many good biblical friends from this year who who lead me closer to Christ and who can hold me accountable too. It's opened up opportunities like this where I have platforms to share my faith. It's opened up opportunities to lead other people, teach other people. It's brought relationships. It's brought everything that I really could ever wish for. This year has been fantastic to me. And there have definitely been the low points, there have been the downsides, but overall this year, even though there's been plenty of ups and downs, I've felt so consistently strong and faithful throughout this year. I felt like at the beginning of the year, as I was really starting to lean in with Christ, just seeing how much that's grown, this year has just brought so much growth for me in every kind of area. And seeing how much this year has really affected me, looking back on all of it now that we're in December, it leaves me very thankful for this year, but also hopeful that God is only going to increase it next year.
Yeah, a huge thing for me this year has been relationships. And this year's been weird too, especially looking back. This is about the time where I tend to like really look back at the year, and kind of assess how it all went. Um, I really don't even remember like the first couple months of this year. Like I don't know what happened in that time frame, but I really just don't remember it. And this year's been starting this year. I remember I shared my testimony for the first time on stage. It's the first time I've ever publicly spoke like that, which was a really big achievement for me. And but besides that, I really don't remember. And I just remember, this year really being the first year where I really had faith in Christ. And it was my faith, not my parents' faith. It was my faith. I'd went on this whole journey the year prior, of becoming like an atheist in June, and then becoming a Christian again by like January of this year. And so it's just a weird year starting out, and then we just continue on a lot of grinding with the YouTube. The YouTube's been bumpy road, man. With being consistent. But the big thing this year's been relationships, with learning like how certain people act, just understanding people, and in the way that I am too, like understanding myself and how I can be towards other people that make them do certain things, and really having to hold myself accountable um, for the problems and other relationships in my life, because I think I'm really quick to point fingers, um, and really I just need to look inward and know that I'm really the only person I can change. I can't change anybody. I can try and I can speak my mind. That's something I've really pushed myself to be open with the people in my life, to be honest with the people in my life. Um, but really just knowing that I'm the only person that I can change. And if nobody else is going to change, being okay with that, you know? And also just being okay with like it not being perfect, you know? And realizing that I'd rather be friends with this person, even though it's not a perfect relationship, than not be friends with them at all and just like to cut them out from my life. Because that's the first thing I want to do. Like everything I want to do is be like super quick decisions and not have to worry about stuff. It's always been like, oh, stop being friends with them, stop talking to them, just like cut them out, cut them out, cut them out. And that's a lot of the advice that you see online, is to cut those kind of people out of your life. But I just never, like, I didn't want to. And I'm still not perfect at it. You know what I'm saying? Like I still battle with it. But just being patient with people, I think, is huge. In relationships, really looking at them like waves, ride them like waves. Like you have a season of feeling super good together and everything's like rocking and going well. And then there's going to be like a rough season. And then you just ride it out with relationships, and wherever they take you, they take you. And not stressing about them too much, because relationships, I mean, you're two human beings with two different life paths. And it's going to be interesting. But I think just being patient with each other is going to be a huge part of just maintaining the relationship.
This year has definitely taught me a lot of patience, especially with relationships, because I've gotten closer to a lot of people. I've met a lot of new people, and I've seen how much they can how much they can bring to my life and how much God really has planned for them in my life. And trusting in that, I think, is what's helped me been the most patient, because I know it's not always going to be an immediate payoff. I'm not always going to be able to see the reward immediately, but I can trust that being patient with these people is going to be worth it, because patience is how the best relationships are built. It's how people lead to some of the happiest memories of their life, and it's how people are led closer to Christ is through other people. And I think that's why we're made to be in community so often, is because being around other people, God knows it's going to build us up. Despite the ups and downs in our relationships with others, all that's going to do is help us learn, and it's going to help us grow with each other and learn how to become better followers of Christ.
If money and other people's opinions didn't matter, what would you do or be?
I think I'd be exactly where I am right now.
You think so?
hmm Definitely leading these worship nights, leading on stage every Sunday morning, and if money wasn't a problem or age wasn't a problem, I'd definitely be touring with people right now and just seeing God's influence all around the world. I'd be recording albums. I'd really be fulfilling my dream, which I'm already stepping so much into right now with these worship opportunities that have opened up. But no matter what's blocking you, age, money, experience, people's opinions, I think there are little steps that can always be taken to fulfilling your dream and fulfilling your purpose. And those little steps for me have snowballed into so much. And I can only imagine how much more it's going to add up. And it's never going to be a perfect road, right? There's always going to be ups and downs despite what's blocking you. But there's nothing really blocking you from fulfilling your dream. It's all temporary. It's all just kind of it's mostly in our own heads, right? If age is a problem, then wait. If experience is a problem, then go find places you can get more experience. If money is a problem, trust God that He will provide for you financially. Look for support in other ways. Look for more ways to find money. If anything is a blocker, there's always a way to get around it. And I think having that mindset of looking for small steps to fulfill your purpose that you're not blocked from right now, it's going to snowball and remove a lot of those barriers that are keeping you from your biggest dream.
I appreciate you coming on the podcast, bro. You're an absolute epic human being, and I think you're going to do a lot of amazing things.